Hidden within the ancient scrolls of Greek mythology lies a secret so perilous, it evaded even the wisest of sages. Ares, the god of war, with his towering, muscled frame, clad in burnished bronze, dark eyes burning like coals, was bound by blood to the fearsome Amazons, the fiercest warrior women the world had ever known. These women, tall and sinewy, their skin kissed by the sun, with long dark hair braided tightly to keep out of the way of their gleaming armor, were feared for their unparalleled skill in combat. Yet beneath their fierce independence and unbreakable sisterhood lurked a shadow, a pact with Ares, a bond forged not in trust, but in fire and blood. In the thick of battle, their spears glistening with the blood of their enemies, the wind carrying the scent of iron and sweat, Ares' voice would whisper in their ears like the hiss of a snake. "Daughters of war," he murmured, his voice rumbling like distant thunder, "you fight for me. You live for battle, and through me your enemies will fall." Hippolyta, their queen, tall and regal, her deep-set eyes glinting with determination, often stood alone by the fireside, staring into the flames as though seeking answers in their flicker. She had made this pact with Ares, her heart torn between duty to her sisters and the growing unease that they were mere pawns in his endless thirst for war. "Are we free?" she once asked in the stillness of the night, her voice barely a whisper, the crackle of the fire her only answer. The origins of the Amazons are shrouded in shadow, born of ancient whispers and tales of the gods. They were said to be the daughters of Ares, god of war, and the nymph Harmonia, a woman of ethereal beauty with hair the color of golden sunlight and eyes as blue as the sky at dawn. Their creation was no gentle act of love. Ares, with his broad shoulders and eyes of blazing fire, demanded that his offspring be more than mortal, forged in the crucible of war itself. The daughters of Ares, tall and lithe, with muscles honed like finely tempered steel, grew into warriors unlike any the world had seen. Their long, dark hair flowed wild as they trained, their bronze skin glistening with the sweat of battle. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, mirrored the savage lands they lived in, a place where the winds howled through jagged mountains, and the ground was littered with the bones of fallen enemies. Ares would watch them from afar, his armor glinting in the moonlight as pride swelled in his chest. He reveled in their ferocity, their hunger for victory. In the silence of night, Ares crept into their dreams, his voice a low murmur, both soothing and terrifying. "You are my daughters," he whispered, his breath like the cold wind that swept across the barren plains. "Born to conquer, born to shed blood in my name." His words lingered like an ancient spell, filling their hearts with fire. But behind his promises of power, there lay a shadow, a debt of blood, a sacrifice only the strongest could bear. Led by the fierce and imposing Queen Hippolyta, the Amazons were feared across the ancient lands. Clad in shimmering bronze armor, her dark hair braided tightly, and her piercing eyes like embers in the night, Hippolyta moved through the battlefield like a tempest. Her warriors, tall and sinewy, with sun-bronzed skin and raven-black hair, unleashed arrows with deadly precision, each one finding its mark in the chaos of war. Their swords flashed in the dying light, cutting through enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. Despite her strength, a strange pull gnawed at Hippolyta's heart, drawing her ever closer to Ares, god of war. His presence lingered around her, unseen but felt in every clash of metal, every cry of pain. She often knelt in the dead of night, the campfires burning low, casting long shadows across the blood-stained earth. She whispered her prayers to him, her voice low, as the night air cooled her sweat-drenched skin. Then, one evening, as the scent of smoke and iron filled the air, she heard it. Ares' voice, deep and commanding, carried on the wind. "You are strong, my daughter." His words slithered through the stillness, sending a shiver down her spine. "But strength alone will not shield your people from ruin. You need more." Hippolyta's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded as she gazed into the darkness, her lips trembling. "What more can I give, father?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The silence stretched thick and heavy, before Ares' answer came like a hammer upon stone. "Your loyalty and your will to wage my war." Hippolyta stood tall, her olive skin gleaming beneath the pale moonlight, her dark hair cascading like a river of shadow down her back. Her steel-gray eyes, usually filled with the fire of conviction, now flickered with unease. She had agreed to Ares' offer, though doubt clung to her like a shroud. The war god loomed before her, his towering form cloaked in shadow, his armor glinting faintly with an eerie glow. With a slow, deliberate motion, Ares placed the magical girdle into her hands, its surface cold, the intricate patterns of war etched into the leather. "With this," Ares intoned, his voice deep and gravelly, "you shall be invincible, a queen above all warriors." But Hippolyta's heart, though she clenched the girdle tightly, felt heavy. The weight of the gift was more than its physical presence. It bore the burden of expectation, of bloodshed. As she fastened it around her waist, a sudden surge of power coursed through her body, her muscles tightening, her senses sharpening. She felt invincible, yes, but also tethered. Ares' face, a mask of cruelty beneath his bronze helm, twisted into a sinister smile. "Now, daughter of war," he whispered, his breath cold as winter wind, "let us unleash chaos upon the world." Night after night, Ares haunted her dreams, appearing in fire-lit battlefields drenched in blood. "Lead them," he would command, his voice like thunder. "You are my chosen. War is in your very veins." Her sleep became restless, the line between protector of her people and agent of destruction growing thin, the world she once knew slipping into shadow. As the cold night air clung to the Amazonian camp, Antiope, tall and fierce, her dark hair falling in waves over her bronze shoulders, silently approached her sister. The firelight cast shadows across their strong, muscular forms. Antiope's sharp features softened as she hesitated, her deep brown eyes searching Hippolyta's face, now hardened by the weight of war. "Sister," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind rustling the trees, "I fear you have drawn too near to Ares. His power is not a gift, it consumes." Hippolyta stood by the fire, her back straight, the gleam of her gilded armor reflecting the flames. Her eyes, once warm, now shimmered with a strange, cold light, faintly glowing in the pale moon's gaze. "Ares has bestowed upon us strength, power," she said, her voice edged with resolve. "Without him, we would be nothing." Antiope stepped closer, her bare feet soundless on the cool earth. Her heart pounded as the words formed on her lips. "We are Amazons," she replied firmly, her voice rising with the wind. "We are strong, not by a god's favor, but by our will. We do not need the gods to wage our wars." Hippolyta's jaw clenched, the muscles in her face tightened, her once soft expression now a mask of stone. "You do not understand, sister," she hissed. "Without Ares, we are weak, vulnerable to the world of men." The fire crackled between them, the night growing colder as the distance in their hearts widened. As the rift between the Amazons deepened, Ares pressed harder, relentless in his demands. Night after night, he invaded Hippolyta's dreams, his voice a chilling whisper carried by the winds of the underworld. "Lead them," he would murmur, "beyond the lands you know, into wars unclaimed by mortals." The scent of iron and smoke clung to his words, thickening the air around her as visions of distant battlefields swirled in her mind. One fateful eve, his tone shifted. It was no longer a whisper, but a booming command that shook her very bones. "Take your army to Troy," he ordered, his voice like the clash of swords. "That war will nourish me for generations." Hippolyta's heart pounded like a war drum, torn between duty and dread. "Troy?" she replied, her voice trembling like a leaf in the storm. "But that war, it is not ours." Ares' eyes darkened, his voice turning cold as winter's bite. "It is now," he growled, each word a blade. "You owe me. Do not forget the power I have bestowed upon you." His gaze burned into her, a reminder of the blood pact that bound them. Hippolyta felt the weight of the pact press upon her like a heavy shield. She had no choice. Swallowing her fear, she called upon her warriors, their armor gleaming under the moon's pale light, knowing in her heart that this path led to ruin. The air was thick with the stench of blood and smoke as the clash of swords echoed through the burning fields of Troy. The Amazons, fierce and unyielding, cut through the ranks of men like a storm unleashed. Their arrows flew swift as the wind, and their swords sang a deadly tune, carving paths through their foes. Yet amid the chaos, Hippolyta stood apart, her gaze heavy upon the battlefield, watching with growing dread. Every strike, every cry of pain seemed to deepen the pit in her chest. As the towering figure of Achilles advanced, his blade gleaming red in the waning light, he met Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, head-on. The clash was brutal, their swords ringing like thunder. But in a flash, it was over. Penthesilea fell. Hippolyta gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The sight of her sister in arms, lying lifeless on the blood-soaked ground, was a wound deeper than any blade could inflict. "Ares," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what have you done?" In that moment, the truth struck her like a cruel blow. Ares had never been their ally, never their protector. He had merely used them, his daughters of war, as pawns in his endless game of destruction. The slaughter, the suffering, this was not glory, it was madness. The weight of her choices pressed upon her like the cold hand of death. She had served not as a queen, but as a weapon in the hands of a god who craved only chaos. Desperate to break free, Hippolyta stood in the cold, crumbling temple, its air heavy with the musty scent of decay and lingering whispers of forgotten battles. Flickering torches cast eerie shadows across the cracked stone, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed her turmoil. Her heart pounded, fear and fury intertwining as she stepped forward. "I am done being your puppet," she cried, her voice shattering the silence, reverberating off the ancient walls. From the darkened corner, Ares emerged, his presence like a looming storm. His eyes glinted like molten steel, and his armor clinked with every slow, deliberate step. "You cannot defy me." His voice was a deep, menacing growl, laced with the weight of centuries. "You are bound to me by blood and war." His words coiled around her like chains, tightening with each syllable. Hippolyta's grip tightened around her sword, its hilt slick with sweat. Her breath hitched, but she stood firm, every muscle tense. "I was born from war," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "But I will not die by it." With a swift motion, she hurled the enchanted girdle at his feet, the metal clattering like a final, defiant heartbeat. The bond shattered, and in that moment, the weight of her rebellion pressed down like a heavy storm cloud. But the silence that followed was heavy with loss. Ares' protection was gone, and the Amazons, once shielded, now stood exposed, prey to the merciless forces that lurked in the shadows of the world. In the quiet aftermath, the Amazons withdrew from the known world, retreating to the distant and hidden shores of Themyscira. The winds carried whispers of their once mighty presence, now faded like echoes of a forgotten storm. Far from the eyes of men and the reach of gods, they sought refuge. Queen Hippolyta, though her crown still rested upon her brow, bore the invisible weight of her choices. Each step was heavy with the memory of battles fought under Ares' shadow. Her gaze often lingered on the horizon, where war had once called them. Her heart burdened with the cost of those lost days. The warriors, once resplendent and feared, now seemed a reflection of their past glory. The fire in their eyes had dimmed, haunted by the blood they spilled at Ares' behest. Conversations were hushed, their laughter a distant memory. "We fought for him," Antiope once whispered, her voice cracking like dried leaves. "But never again." A silence followed, the weight of her words settling over them all. Yet in their exile, the Amazons found a strange peace, a sanctuary in their solitude. They took to guarding their island fiercely, vowing to protect it from the corrupting hands of the outside world. Still, the scars of war lingered, unseen but deeply felt, etched into their hearts as a grim reminder of the fatal cost of power. The tale of the Amazons echoes through the ages, a story woven with valor, loyalty, and the tragic cost of ambition. Born under the watchful gaze of Ares, their strength in battle was unmatched, yet it was their unyielding spirit that set them apart. Picture the dusky skies of an ancient battlefield, where the clashing of steel fills the air, and amidst the chaos, their queen, Hippolyta, stands tall. Her voice, firm yet trembling, confronts the looming figure of Ares. "I will no longer be bound by your will," she declares, her sword raised defiantly, reflecting the glow of a dying sun. Ares' laughter rumbles like thunder. "You think you can defy me, child of war?" he taunts, but Hippolyta's gaze remains steady. The tension crackles like the heat before a storm. The Amazons, watching from the shadows, grip their weapons tighter, torn between fear and loyalty. Their hearts race, knowing that their fate hinges on this moment. Their courage tested not by an enemy, but by the very god who once forged them. The Amazons' rebellion was not without cost. Their victory, though hard won, left scars etched deep into their souls. In breaking free from Ares, they paid a heavy price. Yet in their sacrifice, they found something greater: the strength to stand alone, to carve their own path. Their story, still whispered by the wind, reminds us that true power lies not in the might of gods, but in the choices we make. Even now, the legacy of the Amazons endures, a testament to the fierce battles we fight within ourselves, far greater than any fought with sword and shield.